Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anna, and I'm with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. Today, we have Katie Snap joining us, who is a quality engineer at the National Labs and holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Katie owns her own consulting company and is trained in the psychology and neuroscience of leadership. Katie specializes in business development, marketing, strategic planning, product customization and delivery, and customer service, and will be presenting negotiation skills for women-owned small businesses. Katie, if you wouldn't mind progressing to the next slide, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. We will be using the Q&A function to take questions and welcome attendee participation, so don't hesitate to ask us any questions you may have. Definitely don't be shy. We'll answer those questions throughout the webinar. And the next slide features some COVID-19 business resource links, which I won't go over in detail, as we'll send you a copy of the presentation at the end of the webinar. And then lastly, this coming slide, please visit us at our website at nmsbdc.org to view our upcoming no-cost webinars or to sign up for our no-cost counseling services. I'll also send a follow-up email to you with this information. Thanks so much for joining us. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Snap here. I'm glad you're here. Anna and I were just chatting a little bit. This is the third time this same session has been offered. We offered up 3 different times, and so this is the last of the 3. Glad you guys could fit it in. And we do have a small group today, which to me is always a bonus because people feel safer jumping in, and I just want to encourage that. So I see a handful of you and a couple names I know. Hi, Karen. So right now, as people are kind of jumping in, I'll step in with what our objectives are today. And as you go through the process, I really just, want to hear from you. Where are you going to be applying this, and what sort of questions might you have? There is a Q&A box, and so I encourage you to use that Q&A box. Anna will be monitoring it as we go forward, so we're going to answer those as we go along. Okay. All right. On with the objectives. The objectives today, we're going to look at 3 stages of negotiating. So I put it into a really simple 1, 2, 3 before, during, and after, because I think that's a great way of prepping, rolling it out, and then doing a little recap. So we'll go into each of those 3 stages, and within each one, there are specific skills. In those, it's important as a woman to be using your power and influence. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about mental preparedness. One of the reasons this is unique is that it is applied to women that are in these situations. And we find that women have different baggage around negotiation, right? So I don't know if you feel like you're in that category or not, but we're going to have a couple of polls here just to kind of find out if that's the case. So mental preparation is really, really important. And then the confidence piece. So as you walk away, you'll have some sort of confidence. You're listening to the voice in your own head and feel like you're ready to go forward and do it. All right. So as far as the presentation outline, I'll hit on mistakes that women make. I will hit on the 3 stages, as we mentioned before, skills within each one. And I will also let you know that for those of you that really like to be mentally preparing yourself as you take a training, it's your responsibility to kind of connect the dots with what I'm saying, what's out here for try this on for size, and then what you take away and run with. One of the ways I help you do that is I will give you some actual scripting. So it'll sound kind of odd to be giving you actual scripting for what do I say in certain stages of negotiating. However, for the training purposes, I think it's great to hear what the steps sound like, what a skill sounds like. What does it sound like if someone's giving me some resistance, and how might I start off by addressing it? So you will see some actual language around some of these skills, and you can take it and personalize it, or for all I care, you can just kind of memorize it word for word. That's fine too. Okay. Let's begin with some hard facts. Hard facts about, what it's like to negotiate. All right, follow me on these statistics and see how they may be manifesting in your situation. 55% of women and 39% of men admit to being scared when they negotiate. Okay. Is that true of you? Most people don't negotiate their salary. So although most of you probably decide your own salary that are attending here today, assuming that you own a small business, right? As if we have one. Salary, that is. Here's the statistic that's indicative of how we fail to put ourselves out there when it comes to money for ourselves. So money adds a little bit of that baggage factor in there. 70% of women and 54% of men do not negotiate salary after receiving a job offer. That's kind of sad. I have a 27-year-old daughter who her first job out of college, and she got it before she even graduated. I was so proud of her. It was a part-time job when she was in school that hired her full-time afterwards in the aviation industry. And they pulled her on full-time before she even graduated. She started, not just got the job before she graduated, but started working full-time before she graduated. When I asked her how much they offered her, because that's one of the first things you're kind of interested in, what's the offer? She said, I don't know. So I said, you don't know what your salary is? She said, no. I said, you know anything about benefits? No. And I'm embarrassed to say her major was HR, but now she's in aviation operations. But at the time, it was not even on the radar to her to negotiate something. We sometimes feel like we don't deserve to ask. So think about that as one little piece of the picture. I like this because it looks like these ladies came right out of the 80s. Love it. I think I wore suits exactly like that in the 80s. But also this whole, what is it with us? We're like men, only cheaper. We still get less than 75%. I think maybe the last I saw was 75. It may have got a little bit lower, but 75 cents to every dollar that a man makes. So, what's with that? A lot of it is it just the part that's left over from previous generations and we haven't caught up? Or is it truly that we're doing the exact same job and it's unfair out there? Or are we doing it to ourselves? Most businesses expect new suppliers to negotiate and almost never start with their best offer. So people who don't negotiate are almost always accepting less than someone was prepared to pay. The point here, simply choosing to negotiate, simply just saying, I'm going to go in and negotiate. I'm going to ask for one yes. Simply doing that is going to yield you results, even if you're not very good at it. So one study, employees who chose to negotiate increased their starting salaries by an average of about $5,000. So that's a salary negotiation. Boy, what a difference that can make. And in fact, Carnegie Mellon economists said, failing to negotiate your salary at the beginning of your career over the life of that career ends up costing you about $1 to $1.5 million, right? That starts to add up. So even if it's a little, plus the aspect that if you're negotiating, you're showing some backbone, you're showing some aspect of you care about the financial piece of it, even if it's not financial and you're negotiating for something else. It shows that you kind of want to get in the fight. And in fact, that's part of the problem, is looking at it as a fight. So I'm going to ask you just a little bit about that as well. Let's have a poll question. So I'm going to launch a poll here. And I want all 6 of you, because we're a nice small group. So all 6 of you, I'm hoping you have access to a keyboard. Let's do this launch of the following question. Which negotiating situation are you currently facing? And you can select all that apply. I need a business to negotiate a business contract. I often negotiate with prospects about work. I negotiate on behalf of someone else. I negotiate informally with other business people, or I negotiate with clients and suppliers. Okay, so a couple of you have jumped right in. I'll give you a minute to choose those. You could choose more than one. Another 15 seconds. Okay. Melora, I see your comment in the chat. I negotiate with clients and suppliers. I don't know if you can get on the poll or not, but that's good to know as well. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And I'll post them up here. So it looks like a large percent of you negotiate business contracts. So something that looks probably, when you say contract, I think of pretty formal, right? So that necessitates something that's a formal entry, formal approach to how you're doing it. I negotiate informally with other business people is the second highest. None of you really negotiate on behalf of someone else. I don't run across that very much. And then you've got, one of you has a little bit of interaction with prospects at work and clients and suppliers. Okay, but most of you are in business situations and with other business people. All right, follow-on question. Let's see, wait a minute. This is where we get stuck all the time, Anna. Okay, I'm gonna close the poll. And then I'm gonna open up the second one. I see how to do it. Wait, don't tell me.
I'm all ears and eyes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Second question for everyone. Select all that apply regarding kind of where your head game is. Scared of negotiating, needing to learn the basics, want to learn to negotiate contracts, just need reinforcement, or other. And that you can add in the chat box. Okay, another 10 seconds. Oh, we've got everybody's responded. Nice job, everyone. All right. Answers. I'll pick the top scoring ones first. Most of you need the basics or want the basics as well as reinforcement and ideas. Okay. About a third of you say you're scared of negotiating. So a couple of you, I think that's bold because that's being straight out there and authentic. I'm scared of negotiating. So that's one of the reasons it prompts me to teach this class is it keeps me sharp and keeps me from dropping the ball where I think I might be dropping it because of fear. And only one of you feels like you need to learn to negotiate contracts, which is good because that's not really within the scope. So, and again, Melora had said you negotiate with clients and suppliers. All right, so we've got that sense that I get tossed in the situation of negotiating and maybe I don't really know what I'm doing. How many of you have been to formal negotiating training? I mean, there's certainly, other than an hour webinar where you're getting the basics, there's more long-term stuff that you might learn in some sort of a sales course. But really, if you don't need that, you just really want to be able to take these fundamentals, ideas, support reinforcement, give me something that I can walk away with quickly. So you're at the right place for that, because one of the ways that I like to pass on information is by being practical and tactical. And so that's where this topic comes in. Okay, so let's go into where we are with going at it presently. And there are 9 mistakes that women make in negotiating. I like the way that we just decided that there are 9. As I share these 9, identify which ones you relate to, which ones are the ones that you'd say, I think I'm probably guilty of that one. The first one, I mentioned this just a little earlier, misinterpreting negotiating for arguing. Now, often I'm going to generalize this by saying things like as women. But generally, women like to be collaborative and like to work together in packs. When an argument occurs, it looks more like it's a win-lose, and that doesn't feel collaborative. So when we see negotiating as something that's a win-lose, we're more likely to have some fear around it, and then we're more likely to get caught up on not doing this right or doing this defensively or not having confidence. Therefore, if you're not being confident, you can't think straight and you can't be creative. So misinterpreting negotiating for arguing is one of the first things that I want you to dissect in your head as being associated with each other. There are times, certainly, when people play win-lose when they're negotiating, right? So if they play win-lose, it means I got to jump in and play win-lose back because I need to be defensive, or I need to be protective of myself. That's going to get you in trouble, and that is a negotiating mindset that is not going to be helpful. If it ends up moving to a win-lose and you're negotiating, so be it. So be it. But you'd rather not start out with that, because I guarantee you, the other person will sense it, and they'll see that you're playing win-lose, or you're nervous about win-lose, and then they'll come right back and start playing that with you. Failure to set the table. So by setting the table, I mean being aware of what that's going to look like, what the interaction is going to look like, and how I can help influence it. Like, where are we going to negotiate? Is it a neutral space? Is it where we're on opposite sides of a long board table, and so physically we're not close to one another? If I'm close to you, I'm more likely to feel like I'm connected and have a more productive negotiation. But the physical situation can make a big difference. Talking too much, also known as not listening, and which is crazy, because in a webinar, I feel like all I'm doing is talking for an hour. I'm talking about not talking. Accommodating too quickly, jumping in and letting the other person, maybe not stew in the options that are there. Knowing your BATNA. Now, in the How to Get to Yes and Getting Beyond No, which is really two very well-known books about negotiating, they coined the term BATNA, which is an acronym that stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. A BATNA is essentially your backup plan. What's your backup plan? What is the minimal thing that you would be able to walk away with, and have that in your hip pocket, so that as you negotiate, you know that if you're moving more and more and more towards it, you know where to draw the line. Continuing over here, letting emotions derail your logic. A little neurology lesson in part of the coaching training that I learned in neurology of leadership. There is some real basic fundamentals around how we think as humans. I think it's always good to know how we think as humans, so that you're interacting with other humans, you get a sense of what's going on. Emotions. If we're acting out of emotions, we're not using this executive part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which you all know what that is. It's the higher learning piece. It's the executive. It's the smart piece. It's the logic. And so by using the executive part of your brain, you're controlled, you're thinking about what makes sense, and you're moving something forward. When emotion enters the scenario, when it's in your head, we have a very reactive reptilian brain, it's called. It's the amygdala, small almond-shaped little item in the back of your head. That is a thinking part of your brain as well, but it's the reactive part. So it's the part that was put there to keep ourselves from getting killed. So if, for example, someone says something to you that just ticks you off, just like they hit a hot button, and suddenly you see red, or suddenly you're like, it's somehow triggered some sort of emotion that has bypassed your executive brain. You've gone right to that amygdala, and now you're thinking reactively. All right. If you're in that part of a mental state, it's nice to call it a mental state, because that's what it is, an emotional state. You're not going to be able to think logically about it. So that's about as far as the physiological lesson goes right there. Is if you're back in that part of the brain, you're not using the front part of your brain. You're not using the prefrontal cortex. Now, you might know that, but hearing it over and over again is super important. Because if you're in that emotional state, you're the only one that can recognize it quickly and move yourself out of it. Okay. So I have found that maybe this has to do with maturity, and maybe it has to do with practice. When I find myself in a reactive type situation, like I'm starting to get emotionally wrought over something, and that can be anything. It can be anger, frustration, depression, sadness, whatever. I realize that it's a bad time to say something. Negotiation, definitely a bad time to say something because you're likely to say something you don't mean or you haven't thought through. My point of this is simply remember, ladies, if you're feeling this emotional piece jump in, your logic is being derailed, and the best thing to do is just bring it down. Just give it a few minutes and bring it down before you go on. Now, that situation of somebody playing win-lose or seeing that someone else is arguing, that can be a trigger for emotions. If someone's playing win-lose, they're trying to get something over you. So you're feeling this, oppression back at you, and that can have lots of emotional reactions. So the mistake that we make is letting those emotions get into the interaction before we can control them. It's okay to have emotions. You just want to control them. Forgetting that everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. And leverage everything. That's a good way of thinking of it. And in fact, when my kids would ask for something, I would forget this until afterwards, but I often tried to remember that if they're asking for something, the answer is not necessarily a yes or a no. Why isn't the answer a condition? Like, yes, you can do that. And some of us as parents got really good at that, right? Yes, you can do that. You can have the car, or yes, you can stay out an hour later if I see that you've done this chore, you finished your homework, or whatever it might be. So there's all this conditional stuff. I worked with a guy for a while whose statement was leverage everything, just leverage everything. Good to remember. The failing to prepare, kind of like setting the table, knowing how to influence the situation and the setup so that you're both coming to the table with some sort of preconceived notions about what you want to get achieved. You also want to make sure that you are prepared for that scenario. And then last of all, failing to ask. And one of the, I think this was a great learning that I had with a class that I was involved in a few years ago with U&M on negotiating. And we had an assignment in between lessons where I told the students to go out into the world between now and the next lesson. And I'd like you to look for someone to give you a no back. You're going out actually looking for people to turn down your offer. Now think about that. Generally, what we're looking for is people to say yes, right? But our fear is about someone saying no. That's not acceptable. What if you go out just expecting the no? Why not? So ask. You're going to get a no, go ahead and ask. Helps you get over that fear. This was a great lesson. And I had students come back the next week and I said, so what did you do? Where did you go out and try to get a no? And someone said, well, I was at the dry cleaners and I was picking up my shirts and I asked whether I could have it for half price. And I said, did you get a no? And they said, yeah, I got a no, but they also pulled out a coupon for 20% off. Or someone else had said, I was at a fast food, like maybe McDonald's, and I went ahead and got my my hamburger and my drink and my fries, and I thought, I'm just going to ask for a shake. So as I picked it up, I'd already paid. I said, can I get a vanilla milkshake too for like just a complimentary one? And the person made one, turned around and gave it to that person. So people are accommodating. People are just like, okay, sure, no problem. Remember that you're more likely to get a yes than you absolutely think. So failing to ask is a really big mistake. Getting comfortable with those no's will get you there too. Okay, so here's where we're going to go with the structure. Super complicated, right? Rocket science, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So we'll look at the preparation, the actual interaction, and then the follow-up. And the follow-up is relatively fast, but also really good to remember. Here we go. In preparation, we want to pre-think. So I've identified this into 5 different pre-think areas, and we'll step through each one of these. The first one is describing the issue. Now, there's not a lot to this, but it's the very first thing that you'd like to do. What is it that we are arguing? Again, see, I just used the word arguing. What is it that we're negotiating? What is it that we're trying to get an agreement on? And what are my intentions of it? So those two things right off the bat. What is the issue that we're talking about? Issue kind of makes it sound like it's arguing. Maybe I should use a different word. What is it that we're trying to negotiate? And what is it that we're trying to intending to get out of it? Right. That's on you. Here's where my head is. Here's what I would like. Maybe you're negotiating a new customer, a new client, and you're giving them some consulting or some coaching. And you want to be able to give them a package. And but what's the why behind it? What's your intention? Do you know that they have challenges that they're trying to get over? And that might be the issue for them, but for you, it's I want to be able to get them through this next phase of growth. And I want to be able to do it in a certain amount of time that I know they can achieve those things. Where's your intention around that? Those are the first two pieces, the issue and the intention. Then I want you to think about the other side of the table, where they're coming from. Include considerations for where you're going to be, location, physically position at the table. You've probably heard before that when you actually have something physical in between you, like a desk or boardroom table, it also presents a mental barrier as well. Versus consider sitting next to someone if you can, so that you can work through an item collaboratively. That's one little trick, by the way, in the physics or the physical location, the facilities of where you are. Is it going to be loud? What about clothing? What are you going to wear? That, do you want to be dressed up or dressed down? Do you want to set ground rules? Do you know if that person has hot buttons? Will you be needing to go in and immediately establish the sense that we're here working together, and it's not about me wanting to do this for you and you having to say yes to me. It's more about what's that problem? What's that issue that you mentioned earlier? Put it on the table in front of you, maybe literally too, and sit shoulder to shoulder to where you're looking at it as this is what we're doing together. We're trying to solve this problem. I have found that to be a great little trick with getting the other person to feel more like you're collaborating with them. So instead of a face-to-face physically, we actually do a shoulder to shoulder. Okay. Pre-thinking their hot buttons, as I mentioned. Could do a little research. What do you know about them? Then I want you to think about what we call principled negotiation. And this comes from getting to yes or getting beyond no, where principled negotiation is about an interest and its positions and its options versus an issue and it having one or two, either this or this. I'll give you an example in just a minute. So a position on an issue, I'll use the example of, this is one of the first ones after I'd read that book that I was exposed to it. And so I've got this burned into my brain, the Montano Bridge. And I live in the North Valley, so it was a really big thing around here. The Montano Bridge was controversial because it was running through a rural part of, major metropolitan area, Albuquerque, the North Valley, and going over to the west side. But the west side was in need of it so badly that for them, all it was is we got to have the bridge, we got to have the bridge. For the people in the North Valley, it was we can't have the bridge, we can't have the bridge. So those are the positions. A position is the what of the negotiation. An interest, if you think about it like iceberg, those positions are at the top of the iceberg, and it's what you see, but really what's below the surface, about 9/10 of an iceberg, are the interests, and those are the why. That's really where you get a lot of negotiating fodder of how can I get kind of what I want and still solve the interests of the person on the other side. So it made you think, is there a way to have a bridge that doesn't disrupt a rural sense of living in a few neighborhoods? Yeah, and it ends up that that went back and forth, and it, you know, when you saw it in the news, it was always a this or a that. It was always positions, but at the interest level, what was negotiated was we still need the bridge. They had it as that 2-lane bridge for a while, which we know was kind of a farce because like 2 years later, it was the 4-lane bridge. They built it for a 4-lane bridge, but they marked it for a 2-lane, right? And which is fine, and it worked out fine. It's got bike lanes and overlooks and all kinds of great stuff, but it also has a flyby or bypass of the major parts of the north-south walkways in the valley before it drops off into 4th Street. There, the position was still met with having the bridge, but the interest of preserving too much traffic in the North Valley was preserved. So see the difference? By knowing what someone's interests are and by pre-thinking this, so remember, this is part of preparation. So this is thinking about what you know about that person's why. You'll spend a good bit of time distinguishing between those two ahead of time. And hopefully that'll help you give an example of what do I think is important to them. I'll give you some examples for how to find that out too, some language around that. So most inexperienced negotiations remain so focused on position that they ignore all those creative solutions that would have met those underlying interests. And in an effective negotiation, you really will be looking almost exclusively just at interests. So some things you might be asking. So in the prep, ask yourself ahead of time, why am I taking this position? You know, what's important to me about it? I feel strongly this is it, this is it, this is it. You're not going to stop looking there. You're going to look beyond it and ask yourself, why am I taking that? What are my interests in it? Why are they taking that position? What interests are reflected in those? What interests might they have that are not being met by their positions? So maybe there's some other aspects of getting to the east from the west that was not considered, like maybe there's plans for a bus route or a fast train that's going down I-40. I mean, maybe there's those other pieces of it that still meets those interests, and they haven't been in the scope of the picture yet. See where the creative thinking is coming here, right? Are there any other positions that are more acceptable to their side or to me that meet those underlying interests? And you can think of things that come into play, like, so if you're negotiating a contract with someone, deadlines, you know, is there flexibility around deadlines? Is there flexibility around expenses or sales targets? Is there flexibility around how people are involved? So someone might say, you know, hey Jill, I'd like to hire you to come into my team and deliver what you've got, and we'll pay you $50,000. But I can't pay you any more to get done. You know, you've said it's going to take me $75,000. Well, what if you were bringing in a team of 3, but you're only going to have 50,000? So maybe your negotiation is, okay, I can do it for 50,000. Can you spare me part-time one of your staff members? That's an underlying interest because it's helping with resources, people resource. How about resources that you're using, like tools? Are you using outside vendors versus something that they already have? Often when I go in and do training, I can keep material costs low if my customer will agree to print the material for me. So they'll provide 3-ring binders and the printing, and lesson learned, review it ahead of time before they make 50 copies. So you lose a little bit of control, but it's saving them some money, and you're not having to go, you know, wherever it is that you get your printing done anyway. So those are the sort of ways to ask yourself, where are the interests, where are those positions, what are some of the options? All part of the preparation. Now, then it comes to wrangling with whatever you might have. So the couple of you that said, I have a little fear about negotiating, or I have some tentativeness that what I'm going to interact in is not going to go well. Maybe you don't call that fear. Maybe you just call that some tentativeness. So here's an example of where I saw some fears come up, and I thought it was kind of classic. This will be a female example. Last year I was working with a small organization, a nonprofit organization, And they work closely with the court system, so they're aligned with a good part of the legal and the government communities. The executive director at one of the regional offices, I'm going to call her Sandra, but that's not her real name. So Sandra was an executive director at one of the regional offices, which was like a chapter. And this chapter was really highly regarded in their region. But it also had the burden, like any other nonprofit, of securing and maintaining funding for the organization. So of course they had to do fundraising events and friend raising events so that their outreach was continued and they could maintain their image. At one of these events, Sandra was talking with a local businessman that she knew. His name was Bill. And Bill had actually been on the board of that chapter in the past. So he knew the organization, and he was familiar with it. But he'd also been involved in local politics, and he was up for re-election at the city council in that area. So as Bill and Sandra were discussing the upcoming fundraising effort about the organization, she knew she wanted him to continue his financial support. So she's thinking in her head, I mean, we've all been in this position. Here's kind of an opportunity in front of me. I'd like to just kind of, we're face to face. How often am I going to get time from this guy? I want to be able to ask him for financial support. And I'm just going to I'm going to have the courage to do it. So she said something like this: Bill, we're close to our annual fundraising goal. You've been a great supporter in the past. Can I count on you to donate tonight? And Bill said, I'd be glad to, as long as you're willing to support me for city council. So at this, Sandra kind of clammed up because she wasn't expecting a negotiating back, right? We sometimes think, well, this is going to be easy. We're just going to be collaborative. It's either a yes or a no, but this was a yes if. And so it caught her by surprise. She wasn't really sure why she had that sort of reaction, but she did realize that it stopped her a bit. She stopped thinking with her prefrontal cortex for a moment. And now she wasn't really prepared. So if you had been thinking a bit about what might he say, oh yeah, it's Bill, he's a politician, he's probably going to come back and ask, then she would not have been so surprised, right? So for many of us, those sort of spontaneous diversions from the expected direction catch us by surprise. And at any moment, a negotiation can kind of go one of those ways. And it might be where the way you predicted, and it might be the way you didn't. So for those times when it's not where you predicted, it requires some composure. So this is a teeny little lesson in composure, so that when things get kind of critical, you don't lose focus of really what you want from the interaction. I made this post-it for myself several years ago, and I have it stuck up on my bulletin board. And these are the 3 steps that I use to get me back to square. Now, you can steal this if you would like. You could I got my labeler out, and the post is the way I made that. Or you can do whatever works for yourself. But it begins with awareness. Great negotiators have composure and a good understanding of what's going on around them. And that really means you have to be thinking from your prefrontal cortex and not from anything reactive. So it's so simple that it begins with awareness, but sometimes I know it's difficult. Being aware that something is happening to you is over half of the solution right there. So knowing that, uh-oh, I'm getting a little angry. Uh-oh, I feel my face get flushed. Or, uh-oh, I just lost track of where we're going with this. Being able to get yourself back to something composed so you can say something like, I need a second to think about this, or something that just kind of, stops it for a second and gets you back to balanced. But if you can get as far as just aware that it's happening, you're more likely to achieve success. Success is being defined as maintaining composure and acting with intent. So without awareness, you can't get anywhere really unless it's a fluke. So awareness is just the first step, and it's a required baseline. Think of it as, the necessary foundation. Just aware, here's what's happening. Some breathing helps you physiologically. And then from there, you can use your prefrontal cortex, because now you're getting into some insight. This is where I get a little geeky. Analyze what's going on. Women are great at this. So that insight piece is what's going on and why did it disrupt me? And then from there, have courage, which is the backbone to do what you've analyzed as the best action. And maybe that's inaction, right? Because it's okay to simply say, give me 5 minutes. I need to stew on this just a bit. You can be unknowing of what the next step is to take, but doing it in a confident way. So that sounds like, I don't know. Let me think about this for a sec. Can we take a break? I still sound pretty confident, but I'm confident that I need to go think about it. Okay. So that's awareness, insight, and courage. And that's my little trick. Now, by the way, back to Sandra that I mentioned before, because I want to share with you the way that conversation that I had with Sandra after she told me about this thing with Bill, where Bill said, sure, as long as you vote for me for city council. Her observation really affected me because she had the insight of what was going on. She did this awareness. She said it caught her off guard, but then she had this insight. And she said to me later, she said, Katie, I felt like I was being asked to put out. I'm telling you guys this because we're all girls in the room. And that means something different for us. I felt like I was being asked to put out. And I thought, whoa, now listen to all the implications that has. The least of which is Bill asking for a sexual favor in return because he was not. But what might that possibly be saying about what we have at the core of our aversions to negotiation? It's this, am I giving to something of myself? Why does it have to be this back and forth? And why can't I just get a yes or a no from him instead of this, yeah, you gotta give me something back. So I'm not a psychologist and I am not being able to tell, what all is going on in our heads, but it sure makes you think if something is sidelining you, what's all the baggage behind it? Okay. I thought her insight was really, really fascinating. Let me go to this next item, which is a nice little tip that is useful for the preparation. And you can tell here the preparation is a really big part of this. I use a PPP, so it's a quick way of preparing. And you can also use this on the fly, by the way. It's great if you walk into a meeting and you don't have an agenda. You can just rattle off in like 1 minute. What's the purpose we're here? What's the process? And what's the payoff? So purpose looks like, the why are we here? Process would be the steps you're going to take to get there. And then the payoff is what we're all going to walk away with. In a negotiation, it might sound something like, hey, we're here to try to figure out how we can help get your employees through the training that they need. What I'd like to do is hear about, a little bit about what you guys have for challenges, what your objective is in getting those employees trained, and any other specifics that you want to have in that. And then I'll see whether I've got a good fit for how that might be accomplished. That's the process. You're going to talk and then I'm going to talk is really kind of what I just said. By the end of the hour, we should have a really good understanding of where your gap is and what my capabilities are. And then I can come back with a proposal. I'll put something together for you and come back with a proposal. Now, it took less than a minute, but it got everybody on the same page. And you'll find that a lot of times people come into scenarios thinking it's going to look different than it is. So the process piece really helps identify how you're going to go about doing it. So it keeps people from getting off railed. Okay. Any questions? Jump in. I don't see any. I'm sure you guys are just busily taking notes and stuff. Anna will make sure that PDF is available for this. So if you guys want to, anything that's on a slide, you'll be able to reference later. Okay, now we're going to go into the interaction. The interaction piece: entry, explore, give and take, and then closure. And I'll give you some examples here. So the entries where you might want to use that PPP. You're going to create that dialogue. You want to be present. You'll probably have done some preparation around this, like where's my confidence? Am I ready to show empathy? Am I, making eye contact? I want to let them know that, I'm going to say what I want and I'm going to say what I mean. And there's going to be, if there's distractions, maybe we take a time out or whatever it might be. So I just kind of have that open posture about this is going to be a good entry. I pulled this from a website that's run by Rebecca Shafir, and I liked this Zen of Listening thing. I'll let you read it. Take a second to Take a second to get a drink. I thought that was nice. Let's see, just rearranging some stuff here. Okay. All right, so the entry is the first piece. The second piece is the exploratory part. So you're wanting to pull information out from this person or these people. And here's some example statements. Remember me telling you I was going to give you some scripting? I just like it because you can steal it and run with it. And some of these are just great standalones. What's your current situation? What do you hope to achieve? I love the idea of obstacles because guess what that's going to get? That's going to get some interest uncovered. What's important to you is one of my favorite statements. I use it all the time at work. I use it with coaching. What are the consequences of us failing to reach an agreement? So that's a good way of reminding the other person that we're here to be agreeable with one another. I guess you can reach an agreement without being agreeable. Caveat. Then a little bit of give and take. You know, again, I'm geeking out a little bit because you're kind of doing the entry and now you're doing a little give and take. But this includes showing empathy. So you're showing the other side that you're open to them, that you can have, you know, openness to their ideas, that you want to look like you're open-minded, because if you look like you're closed-minded, it's going to sound like you're playing win-lose. And then they start closing off. Versatility encourages versatility. And versatility is the degree to which you're seen as meeting the needs and expectations of others. The degree to which you are seen as meeting the needs and expectations of others. If I see you as being open to meeting my needs and expectations, regardless of yours, I like that you're listening to mine. My natural response back is to be opening back. Empathy, you can use empathy in ways like I can understand why you feel this way. I can understand your need to push for efficiency. I can understand that this is a hard area for you to give on. I can see that what you're asking for is legitimate and I would like to meet your needs. So none of those had the but in them, by the way. Just take the but out. That's a buttectomy. Just take the but out and put in an and. Here's some sample statements of kind of moving it forward even farther at the give and take. So what I heard you say is that for this to work for you, it's going to have the following attributes, blah, blah, and blah, right? Just repeating. I can agree to blank if you will agree to blank. Give it a try. Again, look for a no occasionally and you'll be surprised at what you might get. I understand you value the rapport we have with our members. Is that right? This was for a credit union. Would you be willing to sponsor our luncheon if we use your logo on all of the mailings? So here's a little something for you. It doesn't cost you anything, but it gets you something. Nice. That's because your interest, Mr. Credit Union, may have been to have some exposure. Doesn't cost you anything to put your logo on our mailings. Read some nonverbal clues. So those hidden messages like where the other person's gestures are, body language. Women are very good at this. You know, I think I've been in negotiations before where the man will walk out and say, I thought that went really well. And the whole time, all I saw was, you know, this and this on the other side. I saw hesitancy and he didn't read any of it. So we're good at that. Remember to look for that. People touching their face, touching their eyes, lack of eye contact, arms like this. So I'm careful about looking this way too. And I make sure that I'm open, right? Fiddling with objects sometimes can be an indication that the person is, you know, uncomfortable. It could be that that's the way they think. Squirming in the chair could be that that's what they need. Could be their ADD. Could be that it's something else. Taking off their glasses and kind of closing their eyes, like, oh God, you know, doing that. That's a nonverbal. You'll have to figure out what the interpretation is. And I would actually see that as a clue to come right out and ask, you know, there's where you can be empathetic. I don't want any discomfort in the room around this idea that I'm proposing, right? You've just reflected it. Where's everybody stand on it? And lastly, in the interaction, what do you do with what you hear? So you respond to your counterpart's arguments. You want to avoid focusing on the other person's stated position. You'd rather be able to draw in, because they might not be seeing the difference between position and interest. So distinguish between the two. So I understand that you want to stay to your $50,000 budget. And you also want to be able to have all of your employees trained, and you want to be able to have it flexible time and blah, blah. So there's all those interest pieces that you remind them of versus just that it's going to be 3 days, it's going to be 50,000. No. We've got some wiggle room here. Listen for their interests, priorities, deadlines, listen for those clues. Put yourself in their shoes. How might it be in conflict with yours? Are you focusing too much on demands? Like, are they being demanding? Develop reasonable responses to their no's. So remember, remain calm, choose your words carefully, frame responses in terms of your counterpart's real interests and needs. And if you do get a no, think about the human behind it. Don't think of it as I've just been rejected. Think about where it's coming from. Okay. All right. So that's the last piece of interaction. Actually, the last piece within the interaction is the closure. Sorry, we really did have another chart. I lied. And the closure looks like a nice little verbal wrap up as you're getting things to the end. I feel like we're extremely close on this. What would you consider a fair compromise? I feel like we're extremely close on this. Do you think there's room for us to meet in the middle? I feel like we have an agreement in principle. Let's work on the details. That's positive. I mean, maybe you haven't agreed on things, but instead of saying we're just not agreeing on anything, I'm saying we have an agreement in principle. Let's work on some of the details. That gets people thinking more like this is going to work. Now we're going to go to stage 3, which is the follow-up. Always a good idea to reinforce and support. Always good idea to do a post-mortem so that next time you can, live, as I say, you can really live to negotiate another day. So you want to let the other person feel like, hey, maybe it's a quick note. Maybe if it's something that they bought from you, you send a little something that says looking forward to it. Maybe if it didn't work out, you also send a note. For those of you that have customers, that is a great way of maintaining relationships. And it shows courage that we haven't burned a bridge. We just didn't agree on something, and we're going to go live to negotiate another day, which is also part of the follow-up is how have I wrapped everything up nicely to where I've learned from it? I've maintained relationships. I can't tell you the number of times where I felt like, gosh, I had a contract years ago with doing some work at Sandia before I worked there with a very large population, doing a fantastic training. I was super excited about it. And at the last minute, by last minute, I mean like a week ahead of time, they canceled. I had suspicions that it had to do with something that one person kind of upended. And so, of course, the first thing I thought was, God, was it something I did? Did they see something on my website? Did somebody say something bad about me? I mean, there's all kinds of things that run through your head, right? But I wrapped it up very nicely. I made sure that I kept the relationship. I didn't let it show that I did tell them I was disappointed, but I didn't make it sound like, well, you guys can't do that all of a sudden. I mean, we had a cancellation agreement. So, I was compensated for the work that I put into it, but I kept that channel open. And several years later, I ended up talking to one of the managers that was in that department. I said, whatever happened with that? And she told me everything that was going on behind the scene, none of which had to do with me. There was so much chaos in particular. And boy, I'm glad I still had an open conversation with her, and she was just about to retire. And it just felt good. So that's a nice little piece of wrap up to remember, keep those channels open regardless what's happened. Okay, those are the 3 pieces. Preparation, interaction, and follow-up. And I'm going to leave it at that because it is lots of information. It's definitely a lot of information in the preparation stage. Interaction is the dicey stage, and then follow-up is just a nice little reminder. Tell me, do we have any questions? Anything that wasn't clear? Anything you want to share? Any challenges you guys have? And I think people can probably unmute themselves and jump in if they wanted to. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely don't be shy. If you want to jump in conversation, raise your hand and I will unmute you and allow you to talk. I don't think you have that option, unfortunately, on your end. So my apologies about that, but I'll allow you to talk. And yeah, just encourage questions over here. And in the meantime, just want to also thank you for your attendance and to just let you know again, I know Katie already said this, but you'll receive a copy of the webinar slides after the presentation in a follow-up email. And we'll also send through a post survey to better tailor our webinars to your needs. So if you can be sure to fill that out, that would be great. And I'm not seeing any questions. So Katie, is there anything in specific you want to say to kind of wrap things up? We're sad this is our last presentation with you. Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to have you. We really appreciate it.
You guys do such great work. I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I guess in that case, just a reminder as well that the New Mexico Small Business Development Center is here for you to help you during any stage of your business. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and visit our website at nmsbdc.org to view our upcoming no-cost webinars or to sign up for our no-cost counseling services. And once again, thank you for your attendance. And as always, thank you so much, Katie. We have appreciated and enjoyed being with you.
Nice meeting all of you. Good luck to you. Holler if you need anything.